Kyle from Bloodhound Pix, and welcome to another episode of COVID Comfort. Today we are going to be talking about my top 10 horror discoveries of 2020. 2020. Whatever. During these times, I've definitely realized that I like to watch a lot of older films. And I've discovered a lot of older films that I haven't seen, but I don't really get to talk about those on our best of the year top 10 lists, but I do here. So, these are the top 10 films that didn't come out in 2020, anytime before 2020, horror films that I saw this year. And I'm not huge on ranking, but we will rank them, sort of. My number 1 and 2 maybe are actually important. But we will kick it off then with number 10, Crawl Space. This is a bonkers 80s horror slasher with Klaus Kinski, directed by David Schmaler, most famous for making the film Tourist Trap. Basically, Klaus Kinski is like a Nazi in hiding, someone that escaped persecution after the war, and he runs this apartment building in probably LA. It's not really specified, and he is kind of performing experiments on some people, but mainly he's kind of like creeping on everybody through the vents and offing these beautiful women who are the only people he will let rent at his apartment building anyways. It is just ridiculous. I am probably going to make us do an episode on it proper, just because it's super ridiculous. But it's a lot of fun. I think it's just because it's Klaus Kinski mostly, and he is absolutely insane, but also like believable as an ex-Nazi, because he is German and he is goddamn insane. And this is on Tubi amongst other places. I'm sure it's streaming almost anywhere, so that's one I would recommend to check out. It's pretty ridiculous. So that's number 10. Number 9 is going to be Butcher Baker Nightmare Maker. Now, Pure Cinema Podcast turned me on to this one because they have sung its praises over and over. And I'm a fan of Susan Tyrrell, and she is kind of the main attraction here. So basically, she is the aunt of a teenage boy who is about to finish high school and move out of the house. And we pretty quickly find out that her relationship to her nephew is of a very extreme attachment, let's say. And she doesn't really want him to move out and go to college and all these things. And long story short, she kills someone, and we gradually realize that she is pretty unhinged, and there's some twists and turns, and she kind of turns into a mad slasher to an extent, but her performance is so insane, but committed, but amazing, comparable to why I'm putting Crawl Space on this list. This is another one that's really just an absolutely bonkers performance that is the best selling point on why to check this film out. It's also interesting in having like a super early film that has a gay character that isn't really portrayed stereotypically. I mean, you wouldn't have even known. It just played super straight, and like it's just kind of way ahead of its time in that respect. But yeah, it's definitely one I would say to check out if you just want to see some nuts crazy performing going on. So then we're on to number 8, which is Four Flies on Grey Velvet, the 1971 giallo by Dario Argento. And if you haven't seen it, I did kind of a run through, a breakdown of his entire filmography. I watched everything he's done. exhaustive. um, and I hadn't seen this film till this year. I got it kind of as a part of that. Blind bought it. It's been pretty hard to find up till recently, but it didn't disappoint. It's somewhat a typical Giallo, kind of in reverse. So basically, it's about a drummer in a rock band in Italy who is being followed by someone, confronts them, kills the man, and someone else witnesses it and takes pictures and starts blackmailing him and murdering other people. It's interesting in that respect because it's a little bit different, but it still kind of plays out in typical Giallo fashion. The killer has a really creepy, weird kind of mask that would almost be funny, but the weirdness of it almost makes it creepier. And it has an amazing score by Ennio Morricone, which is interesting because originally Argento was going to get Deep Purple to do the soundtrack, but couldn't for certain reasons, and which kind of would have moved in the direction he ends up going with Profondo Rosso. It probably would have been more of a hard-hitting score in that way, more like heavy rock. But Morricone does it amazing. I love the score to the movie probably better than the movie itself. It's like one of my favorite scores of his now. So I would say check it out if you can find it. It's still kind of one of the more obscure of his filmography. So it's out there, though, if you're interested. All right, so then we're going to move on to number 7, which is Dead and Buried. We did an episode on this, so we talked about it at length. 1986 Dead and Buried, which is sort of a cult plot / an undead story / I don't want to give away all the spoilers, but it's a Gary Sherman directed film, written by Ronald Shusett and Dan O'Bannon. It's super interesting. It's really one that, if you've never seen it before, it's super effective kind of mystery as to what is actually happening in this small town where strangers come into the town and are killed by the townspeople, but then some people that we've seen murdered are alive again. I would recommend, if you haven't seen it, just go in blind and see it. It's great. If you have, watch it again. Why not? It's definitely one I'm going to continue to revisit because it's just fantastic. I'd heard it was great, but I didn't have too much of any expectations. It was just one I'd been meaning to watch forever and finally did this year, and loved it. So that's number 7. Number 6 is May from, I want to say 2001. I'm going to double check. 2002. This is Lucky McKee's directorial debut. And I actually I don't think I'd seen any of his movies. And I'd been meaning to see this one forever. And I finally did, and it was fantastic. It is, there's not a whole lot of horror movies like it. It's almost like a Taxi Driver kind of a horror movie. So basically Angela Bettis is May, this social misfit, who lives alone and has this doll that she kind of talks to and is like painfully awkward socially, but also you totally empathize with her. So there is definitely some similarity there in something like Taxi Driver, where you see a character kind of reaching out, but this isn't gonna work out. Even if you get a boyfriend, it's not gonna, you're just cringing throughout it, and it takes a fairly dark turn. But it's really good. It's just super unique. I don't think I've seen a horror film quite like it, even though there is a kind of definitely like a Frankenstein type thing going on where you empathize with the monster, so to speak, if you want to call her a monster. But it is really good. It's definitely one worth checking out. And to piggyback on top of that, I also saw The Woman, which is another one of his films, which is also totally fantastic and super dark. And I feel like it's more relevant than ever. But so check them both out, I would say. So that's going to bring us to number 5, which is Haunt from 2019. I just skipped this one because it didn't look good. It just looked like another horror movie I don't want to see, and I was completely wrong. So I watched this finally when it was on JoBob, and it is a total surprise. I mean, basic setup is these college kids going to sort of an underground haunted house, and the one girl is leaving. The protagonist is kind of leaving an abusive relationship with an abusive boyfriend, and they're the only people in this haunted house anyways, and things are getting more and more intense, and they want to just leave, but it gets more complex, and then we realize that the people running this haunted house are very sinister, and it just gets more and more crazy in the best possible way, in almost maybe a Saw way, but not exactly. But also, like, there's definitely great shades of like Tobe Hooper's The Funhouse, which I love. But it's just a solid, straight up horror movie that you really couldn't ask for more, and it really surprised me. So it's definitely one, if you kind of overlooked it, that's definitely one to give a chance, because it's really damn good. So that's number 5. Number 4 is Nobuhiko Obayashi's The Discarnates, or My Summer with the Zombies. So he is most famous for making Hausu, which is one of my goddamn favoritist movies ever. Yeah, favoritist? Yeah, it doesn't even... Grammar does not matter. That's how much I love that movie. This one I've been looking for forever, because it's one of the few other films he has done that, based on the synopsis, was actually sounded like it was actually a horror film, besides House. Finally dug it up, and it was horror, but also surprisingly heartwarming. So basically, the story is this middle-aged man who lives alone. Is this he writes these kind of melodramatic TV dramas, but you can tell he's divorced, and he's just kind of bitter and lonely. And he's walking around one day, and he ends up going to another part of the city, his old neighborhood where he grew up, and he ends up running into his parents that are his age, and they're just there, and they're alive, and they're living in their old house. And he periodically goes to visit them, and it has this wonderful joy and nostalgia there and warmth. But he eventually kind of realizing that they're kind of sucking the life out of him. And I won't really spoil anything beyond that, but it's not heavy on the horror. It's a little bit more mysterious and moody, but also just full of heart and warmth and this sense of nostalgia, in a good way. It is really interesting. So I don't know if I would recommend that for everyone. You got to be into that. It's not going to be for the hardcore horror fans necessarily, but I really loved it. It was really special movie. So that is The Discarnates. This is Discarnates. Alright, so number 3 is Messiah of Evil, which is another pure cinema podcast. highly recommended film, which I heard them mention so many times that I finally just bought the Blu-ray. This is a 70s, very moody, almost Lovecraftian, little low-budget horror movie. Amongst other things, having a great little opening cameo with a extremely young Walter Hill. But basically, it's a young woman is going to the seaside town where her older father lives. He's kind of a painter, and she goes there to his house, and he's kind of disappeared, and she's just drifting around trying to figure out what's happened to him. And there's a very kind of creepy mood in this town that is in kind of this desolate seaside town somewhere in California. And we're getting kind of the feeling that the town may be some kind of a cult. And I'm not really going to give away anything more than that. But it's just really incredibly moody. And that works in its favor, whether it was fully intentional or not. It just works really well. So it's a very slow burn, but it has some really effective creepy sequences, and it's just kind of, it's just a fantastic mood. So if you're into that, it's not going to be super heavy on the action, let's say, but it's one to look out for. There actually is now like a pretty good HD version, probably I think two different versions on YouTube, if you want to check it out. So that's Messiah of Evil. Then we have number 2, 2014 Starry Eyes. So this is another one that had just been on my radar forever, but for whatever reason I had not sat down and watched it, and I kept meaning to, and I kept always hearing good things now and then. And it fucking blew my mind. Like, honestly, if I had seen this when we did our best of the decade list, it would definitely be in probably the top 5. I thought it was fucking phenomenal. Super well acted. So basically the story is about this girl who is in Hollywood wanting to be an actress, and is kind of a little bit of an outcast. She gets an audition, gives a really intense audition. There's a moment in this audition where I am fearful for what this actual actress is where she's going as an actress in real life outside of the actual film. But has an audition, doesn't think she gets it, gets callback, and she keeps getting these callbacks for this film. We find out there's been maybe a little bit of a scandal with this production company, and just the interactions and the callbacks with these people boundaries are being pushed, things are getting creepy and uncomfortable, but she is also super desperate to succeed, and also just it starts to change who she is and turns her into kind of this vicious thing that is seeking this fame or attention or whatever it is. And it's just fucking, it is amazing. It is so fucking good. It works for what it is, but then you can also see quite clearly that it's kind of a comment on what we might do and the effects that it might have on us for what we would do for success, or what we think success is, and how that might transform us into something else entirely. And Alexandra Essos is the lead. Her performance is mind-blowing. It's just a fucking crazy good film. It's one I can't believe. Not that I hadn't heard about it, but I'm surprised I hadn't heard about it even more. I don't know. It's one I definitely want to watch again. I feel like it's going to become one of my favorite horror movies. It's just really good and really original. So definitely check that out. It was on Shudder, and then it was on Amazon Prime. I guess it is on Tubi right now, but it's out there. So Starry Eyes, yes. All right. So now, before we get to number one, I'll throw a couple little honorable mentions out there. I did mention The Woman, Lucky McKee's other film, one of his other films. I will also mention I saw Jeremy Saulnier's Murder Party, his first movie. It was fucking great. It was super fun, super daring, really effective for what was clearly a super low budget film and just kind of one location. But they did a good job with writing these characters who were all very different and interesting, and just them kind of bouncing off of each other. Gave them a lot to work with, but still developed some whacked out horror scenes towards the end. That one was a lot of fun. I also just went for it and bought Adam Rifkin's Psycho Cop 2, or should I say Riff Coogan. That movie is just crazy as fuck. It's just a bonkers straight to video 90s Psycho Cop slasher. And none of the people that made the film had seen Psycho Cop 1. It's just super silly and off the wall and just fun. And it's kind of what I miss about late 80s, early 90s B movies that were still shot on film and could be incredibly stupid but incredibly fun at the same time. That's Psycho Cop 2. Big recommend to Dr. Caligari from 1989. Not the original, which is great, but Dr. Caligari from 1989. My friend recommended this movie. I had no idea. I went into it blind. And it's in a crazy kind of abstract art film slash kind of almost an absurdist play. And they shot it on these sets that they built that are sort of similar to the original Dr. Caligari in that they're super stylized. But it really spins off Dr. Caligari and tells its own story about this woman's sort of sexual awakening, I would say. But it is just chocked full of interesting, weird things. And I think it's only like 89 minutes. And it's just way out there and fascinating, and one of the totally unexpected discoveries of this year. Definitely one to seek out. It is it's out there online. You can find it. Dr. Caligari from 1989. Check that out if you really want to just see something unique and original. That's for sure. Okay, so we're jumping into our number one, which we have also done an episode on, but I'm still going to talk about it because at some point I'm probably going to do something more, maybe a video essay on this. And this is 1991's Evil Dead Trap 2, which kind of has nothing to do with Evil Dead Trap 1. Basically, it's about a female projectionist, a Japanese projectionist, kind of this outcast, chubby girl who I did not expect to be the protagonist, and who was, and thank you. So good. Basically, there's serial killings going on, and I think they're in Tokyo. And we kind of discover that it's that girl, and then we discover that she has had an abortion that maybe she didn't really want. And it just continues to be more complex and layered and interesting thematically than you would ever expect from a movie called Evil Dead Trap 2. And I fucking loved it. I haven't watched it again yet, so I need to go back and watch it a couple more times. But it just was a total sleeper and full of so many interesting things. Definitely worthy of much reappraisal and reexamination. So, yeah, if you can find it, check out Evil Dead Trap 2. Stay tuned for something more from me on that. But, yeah, that's my top 10 discoveries. I will probably do this again. And maybe at some point I'm going to do some just all other genre discoveries outside horror. But yeah, there you go. Those are some horror movies off the beaten path a little bit to check out or discover or rediscover. So, okay, that's really all I've got. Stay safe out there. Let's hope things get better, America. All right.
Bloodhound Pix podcast is part of the Morbidly Beautiful Podcast Network. Produced by Josh Lee, Craig Drum, and Kyle Hintz. Music by Raymond Seed. Editing by Kyle Hintz.